Okay, so in this video I'm just going to cover the quick changes that are going to be implemented into the live server that are currently being tested through Pegasus. Some of the major changes are going to be mostly to the critical hit system as well as the critical prevention system. As you can tell already by the user interface, there is actually a flat % amount chance to crit as well as a critical amount damage amplifier. Attack speed is still going to be a percentile base, and the rest of your stats are all going to be flat static numbers. But going into it, there's already been a couple changes. Strength still acts the same as it has in the live system for the last X amount of years. It's going to increase your defense, your attack damage with melee weapons, as well as your maximum hit point and your maximum weight carry amount. Dexterity still acts in the same manner that it did before, increasing dex-based weapons attack power as well as your dodge amount. Intelligence it's been edited. Currently it's going to still add attack power for magic-based weapons as well as magic defense and max mana point amount. It is still a buff modifier, but only applies to the cleric and mage class. Concentration still does the exact same thing that it has before, giving you a increase to your range attack power, only based on guns as well as launchers. It does not affect bow damage or crossbow damage. It still increases your critical hit % amount by a small portion as well, and is the main stat for accuracy. I'm actually going to skip Charm because that's going to get a little bit more detailed for a moment. Sense is still going to increase your critical in terms of the % chance to crit, but it does not increase the critical damage amount. Critical damage is going to be strictly derived from skills that your class will learn if it has access to those types of skills, and that is mainly through passives. There is no buff that increases the critical damage amount, only the critical % chance. Alright, so on to Charm. Charm, well, going all the way back to the beta, it initially was meant to increase the amount of reward you would get from doing questing. It's never been utilized for anything more than that, and there has been several myths revolving Charm, such as it increasing your chance to refine, as well as increasing the amount of drops you would receive while killing monsters. None of these myths are true. The only thing that it ever increased was the amount of reward you would get. The other myth was that it would increase your chance to receive a quest item drop. That was never implemented, but it was announced that that would be a feature of Charm, just never added. Charm now is actually going to be increasing the amount of buff static numbers for buffs. Going into a skill tab here, we can actually view exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to a buff. We'll do it with the Hawker Accordance. You'll see it. The description states haste attack speed 15% plus 58.8%. It has a duration of 600 seconds. As with the buff change that was edited prior to Pegasus testing, buffs will be lasting longer. You'll notice the 15% plus 58.8%. Charm is going to increase the plus amount. Attack speed is kind of a funny thing because it is a percentile based amount, and you'll see a lot of descriptions stating that Charm only increases flat numbers of buffs. That's not true. If we move over to the rapid twitch buff, you'll see movement speed up 10% plus 589. That plus number, it's a flat or so-called static buff number. That plus amount is supposed to be the only number that is changed by adding Charm. On stuff like the attack speed and the crit, they will be % based. The other thing that actually hasn't really been discussed very much is that it not only increases the amount of buff static number, but the same with debuffs. You'll see with the Mental Storm, It is a 15, well, with my current charm level, which is incredibly high, it's my main stat for my build. The accuracy down is 15% plus 392. It is actually increased by charm. The same will go with healing. We're just going to overview Bloody Assault real quick. For a quick example, this specific skill does an absorption of 10% health point plus 235. Now, the percent is actually derived from the amount of damage you do. If you do 2,000 damage and you gain 10% of that, you're looking at 200 plus 235 health regeneration from using this spell. Now, I'm actually going to do a stat reset and show you the differences in the amounts. And then we're also going to discuss one other thing that has changed stat-wise with the Pegasus updates. Forgive me, I'm actually going to have to remove all of the items that I have equipped to do a stat reset. There we go. So as you can see, all of my stats are now at a base level with the exception of dexterity. That's actually derived from a passive skill that the raider has access to, as well as the scouts. So if I go back into my skill tab and I hover back over Mental Storm, you'll notice that the accuracy down is still 15%, but the plus amount is only 61, whereas before it was severely higher. You'll also notice with Bloody Assault, the HP is still a 10% absorption rate, but it's only 37 hit points being absorbed. The skill levels are all still the same, which just goes to prove that Charm is actually a very viable stat depending on the effects that your skills carry. For example, Phoenix Slash for a Raider at level 1 will do 200 damage per second with a duration of 5 seconds. Charm does not increase that effect. You know, if we actually go through several of the Cathar-based Raider skills, you'll notice that almost none of them carry any type of an additional stat down or any type of utility attached to them. The Crazy Style Slash does have a 5% plus 12. And if we go over to the melee-based tree, you'll notice that Cathar Upper does have a critical down, but the rest of them don't have a status effect. So having a high charm build for something like a Cathar Raider is probably not your best bet. You would want to play into the either critical passives, your dodge rate passive, or something along the lines of attack power and attack speed passives. For something like a Dual Raider, they actually have a lot of debuffs attached to their abilities. So things like attack accuracy down, HP absorption, attack speed down. The AoEs actually no longer carry any type of effect for a Dual Raider. I'm not sure if they ever did in Evolution. If memory serves right, they didn't. In Iros and in the beta, I believe Bloody Storm had an attack accuracy down AoE and a low damage amount. After that was removed from the game, they actually gained things like Mental Storm and Enfeeblement as well as Weaken. And they still have access to the Evasive Guard and Mirror Phantasm bonuses. So if we go in and say add, actually let's look at a skill specifically. Okay, Mirror Phantasm. It's a dodge up 15% plus 144. Now if we add Charm, you'll notice that the amount actually increases. It's now at 15% plus 170. Now I'm actually going to build up some dexterity really quick. Actually, I believe my equipment gives me quite a bit. Still looking at 249 necessary to equip that. So I'm going to add in a couple points here. Doesn't take me very long to do this because I have a rapid fire trigger on my mouse. Okay, so now I actually have access to this buff. Now this buff does require you to wear a dual wield weapon to cast. If you hover over requirements, equipment, dual swords. we're going to be covering a couple issues with skills in a moment. So, because you can already tell, it still jumped up to 311. I'm going to touch on why that did that. But let's go ahead and cast that buff. And open the attribute tab. So you notice that my dodge rate is at 1741. This is where the change is going to occur with the removal of buff sets, and why switching gear and having high stat sets is still going to be a viable equipment to have. As I increase my charm amount, you'll notice my dodge is actually going up. The reason this actually goes up, well, it actually cut out for a moment. However, simple enough to just recast it. Now, as I add charm, you'll notice that the dodge is actually going up. Dodge affects the buff amounts, and even as your base level stats increase, they will actively update the buffs. So, say you have a survival tool like Evasive Guard. As you switch the equipment, you'll notice my defense and my dodge is up. As you switch equipments, if you get into a bind, and you have access to, say, a high charm amount face item, and maybe a weapon with a charm jewel in it, you're going to be able to actually increase the survivability because of the increase to your charm. Now here's the other modifier, and it's all based on classes. Your class primary stat increases buffs, debuffs, and healing amounts. For a soldier type class, which includes knights and champions, strength is going to increase your buffs. For hawkers and all the secondary classes for them, scouts and raiders, dexterity will increase. The same is going to be this for intelligence on the cleric and mage, as well as concentration for the dealer type classes, the artisan and borg. Charm is actually a bit stronger than all of these, but due to you building into your class stat, they felt it was necessary to increase that, so that way as your character gains power, so do your spells and skills. Sense does not increase any buff amount for any class. It actually is strictly related to critical. It actually does not provide almost any bonus other than 1 attack point for every 10 sense you add. So if I add in and get it up to 20, you'll notice that my attack power did increase. Now that's going to be most of the changes for the raw attribute system, as well as a couple of the statistical percentages that were updated. There is things like Pierce Physical and Pierce Magical. This is going to reduce the actual total amount armor in regards to either physical defense or magic defense. The more Pierce you have, the more damage you're essentially going to do. So instead of thinking of these types of stats as a utility, you're going to want to think of them more so as increasing your damage against that type of resistance. But also keep in mind that if you have a high Pierce magical amount, you're only going to be bypassing the magic defense while using a magic type skill. Now they don't actually have magic type skills anymore. What they have is an element system. It's still kind of new. It's still not exactly working the way that they intend for it to work. But if you actually hover over something like Flamehawk, it does have a fire attribute after the name. Later on down the road, that is actually, I believe, is going to be applied against a magic defense type stat. Other things to cover is more along the lines of equipment. As you can see, I do have a Glorious Raptor Boot Maximum Refined equipped as my foot item. Now the only reason I chose that is mostly due to the fact that the substats on the Dark Raptor that I was using before, they're pretty close. I wanted the additional attack speed, but I found that having the additional defense and magic defense made it more viable in a one-on-one PvP environment against users that do not have summons, which is currently why I have this equipped. If I go against anything with a summon, I actually switch over from my Glorious to a Dark set. This is because the reduction to PVM offense and PVM resistance is it's almost too much of a loss when you're fighting a summon. They are still considered a PVM type summon, which they do check against your resistances, and believe it or not, having a full PvP set is really bad move when you're fighting a summon. The other piece I have is I do have a reinforced raptor chest as a chest item. You'll notice that the HP recovery amount is only 2. I felt that that was a little low, but I haven't checked the rate of regeneration as far as the full set goes. Really the only reason why I'm using it is because the max HP amount is so much higher, and it's better than a grand set because of the PVM resistances and offense capability without the reduction to PvP damage. There was a change made to legendary headpieces. They no longer add your character's primary stat and accuracy. They only add the primary stat. Prior to this piece did specifically have 20 dexterity, 75 accuracy, and I believe 80 accuracy as the secondary hardcode stat, which was removed. So I'm still contemplating the changes to this one and whether or not I should go for a second piece of Glorious or if I should just keep it at that so my resistances to summons is higher. The other thing I have equipped is actually an Elven Raptor Glove. Mana point recovery rate is going to play a very pivotal position when it comes to things like a Game Arena mode. The restrictions are still the same for potions. You cannot use food, you cannot use boosters, you cannot use any of the restricted items that are already in place on the live server. And for a class like for example, a Dual Raider, which is currently what I'm playing, I need to have access to mana. I need to have mana consistently, or else I no longer have access to my debuffs, which is my character's primary method of overcoming a target. If I can't debuff, I absolutely stand no chance. I would completely be in a defensive stance. I would have to just poke and run as much as I can and hope that they died, which isn't a very effective method. That will never work, especially in a group scenario like a Game Arena mode. The other thing I have is just a simple Raptor back shield. I did go for 20 charm and 10 HP recovery rate on purpose. That was actually an intentional build. I wanted to increase my buffs even further, as well as my debuffs, my recovery rate from the HP recovery rate, as well as the additional damage absorption from a Bloody Assault. That did actually help quite a bit. Reading glasses, I'm actually going to invest in a pair of these and the rerolls that it will cost, specifically to get this substat set. Charm and accuracy. Charm's a big point of my build, as you can tell. Accuracy is huge. You do absolutely need to invest some points or some substats or even hard stats into your accuracy build. If you don't, you're gonna miss. Flat out, you're gonna end up missing. I did go for dexterity as a buff modifier, as well as a base stat to add into. And believe it or not, the old Clan War items, these purple named items, they've been around for quite a bit, and nobody's really used them for anything more than maybe PVM farming, or before the level restriction was added to them, they were actually used for lobby farming as well as catalyst farmers. They're now viable. You can actually use them. They are effective. So those who still have them around, their price went up. Feel free to hold on to them and sell them later when they're effective. I believe I'm actually going to end it at this point. I do actually use an exalted weapon. I have access to the epics on the test server. I find that there isn't a huge difference between the two. My actual big thing about it was the bonus, the 4% bonus to PVM offense. Summons hurt. Summons will absolutely hurt you, but they actually have been readjusted to where you can kill them fairly quickly. It's not a good idea to go against a summon, but if you're going against something per se, a raider with the Katar and a stealth or cloak, and their summons on you, and they go into an invisible state, you're gonna have to take out that summon. If you don't, there was a tournament and a knight did lose specifically because he couldn't decloak, and all the character had to do was consistently send the summon onto him and cloak, and it took him out. There was absolutely nothing he could do about it. He couldn't compete with the enemy it was a ingenious tactical move. So things like PVM percents, PvP percents, HP recovery amounts, MP recovery amounts, charm, base stats, every stat is now going to play a point. You can't just run and gun with your primary stat maxed out, a little bit of sense for some crit, and the rest of it into concentration for accuracy. It doesn't work that way. You gotta add points intelligently, you have to add your skills intelligently, you have to play intelligently. This next video I'm actually going to discuss my build, why I built it the way I did, things like that. So I will upload that mostly at the same time that I'm going to be uploading this. I might actually cover a couple other classes, things that have been forgotten, like for example crossbow scouts are entirely different. You cannot play crossbow scout the way you used to, even though nobody played it before. I did spend a couple months toying around with that class. Things like Gunborgs, they're back in the game, they're back in business. You can viably play a Gunborg. Battle clerics, they're coming back. Things with max intelligent gear and attack power, like an Orlo 20 int mask or Oro's gift 50/40s, things like that. Those are going to be amazing pieces for battle clerics. They are not valueless. There's so many things that are going to be different. I urge you to hold on to your gear. Do not get rid of it. Do not sell it for cheap. Do not undercut yourself. Don't waste all that time and energy you put into getting that gear, because a lot of it does still have value. You just have to use it intelligently. I'm going to cancel this recording, wrap it up, and I'm going to start heading over and finishing up the next tutorial, where I will cover equipments that I carry, skills that I use actively, methods that I use to overcome certain enemies. I might even include a couple PvP scenarios, capture them live, that kind of thing. Just depends on what type of environment is going on in Training Grounds right now. We've had a major issue with PKers overnight when the staff's offline. There's not really a whole lot you can do about it, but we'll see what kind of luck there is on that type of situation. If not, oh well, you'll have to just deal with it and figure it out when it goes to live. See you in the next video.